Curtis A reached out to me, said make a theme song for my show. Said alright, just give me all the details, man. And my homie says he don't know. Well, if you're gonna pay me big bucks, cause I might should have something to say. He said, you know what I bring, I'm the customizing king, nothing else matters anyway. So is he gonna have guests? I don't know. Is he gonna go live? I don't know. What time will it be? What will you see? I'm pretty much in the dark, but I can guarantee he'll be customizing action figures, getting paint all on his fingers. It's art by Akerman. It's art by Akerman. Tips and tricks and conversation, sharing his gift with every nation. It's art by Akerman. Art by Akerman. You best get ready, cause now it's time for Art by Akerman.
Welcome back, folks, to another How'd They Do That? This is a series where I talk to folks in the community about what they do well. It could be a type of custom. It could be some photography. It could be sculpting, whatever it is, some form of art, and just really pick their brain a little bit about it and hopefully inspire a few of you to, create on your own. My guest today, I'm really excited for because this is a gentleman that when I first got in the community, inspired me to get started and work on customizing, and really is one of the main inspirations for this channel. That is the director of sales and marketing and everything that you love, Jeremy Girard. How you doing, sir?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me, Curtis.
Absolutely. This is one of those series where I talk to folks that, kind of how they do their art and about, really about inspiring others. And you were like one of the first people I reached out to. Now I know things have been very hectic, very, very busy at Four Horsemen Studios this year. It's just one thing after another, including this giant dragon that was just happening. So appreciate you making some time to talk to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you reached out to me and I loved the show. I watched the show. I was super excited to do it. And it came at a time that I was both professionally and personally absolutely so just nonstop busy. Between, you mentioned the dragon and then a bunch of shows that I did in March and then moving houses, I'm in a new location. So it was just hard to find the time. But as soon as I was fully into the new location, I had a really cool backdrop behind me, something to match yours. I had to make sure that I elevated.
Oh, yeah, yours looks like a museum now. You're good.
It is like a museum. But yeah, as soon as I was all set up, I reached back out to you. Was like, we got to do this. I'm excited.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you making the time. So there's all kinds of things that I could talk to you about there. You've done, several different kind of themes over the last few Legions cons. You were, like I said, early on, you were doing a lot of these things as far as, tutorials and stuff. But when I thought about, okay, what would be like the number one thing I'd want to talk to Jeremy about, it had to be the Kitsune. So, here is the thumbnail that I put together for this, and I just picked out one that I thought was super cool. It's a more recent one that you've done, but can you talk to us a little bit about, first off, why Kitsune? Like because this theme, this Kitsune theme helped you really get linked up with Wolf King Customs, with Walter DeMarco, started a lot of the things that you did after that. So why was that the thing in your head?
So the whole Kitsune Fox characters and customs, they kind of took on a life of its own. But when I go back to the initial idea to do it, which would have been like 2019, I just wanted a fox character. I always have liked the anthropomorphic characters. It's actually what kind of brought me to Four Horsemen originally. I'd collected stuff that these guys had done when they were back at Spawn. And even then, some of the anthropomorphic characters like Poacher were some of my favorites. But the early Four Horsemen stuff from like Seventh Kingdom, the Gothotropolis birds, I loved the animal characters. And I really just wanted a fox character. This was a time when it was before all of the 3D printing was out there. So really you were stuck using other toy lines in order to mix and match parts. This was when I was using a lot of stuff from Lord of the Rings and from Masters Classics, and there was just no fox character. I even had tried to find like those little like Schleich figures or whatever, like those little unarticulated figures, you know, of animals. I tried to find one of those that I could cut the head off, and I couldn't find anything. And then right around this time, I got a message from a gentleman named Walter DeMarco, goes by Mass Customs Online. And Walter's a digital sculptor. And he said that he loved my customs work. And if, you know, I ever had a project that I was looking to partner with him, he would absolutely love to do it. And I was like, well, as luck would have it, I've really been looking to do like a fox character to put on a 2.0 style body. I had imagined it on either like the Elf Ranger or maybe even a smaller version on like the Goblin. And I ended up doing both of those early on. So, you know, I sent Walter some sketches and some photographs of what I wanted out of a fox. And that's really how it started. I had this 3D sculpt of the fox, but the next step was getting it printed. And I'm not a 3D printer. I knew nothing about it. And I mean, again, 2019. So this is, you know, 2019, 2020 at this point. This is before kind of even 3D printers became as accessible as they are today. I had reached out actually to Anthony Houseal because I had seen a post that he was getting started in doing 3D printing. And I was like, hey, man, do you want to print this for me? And he's the one that actually connected me with Len from Wolf King. I'd only met Len one other time. I'd met him at Legions Con, you know, that year, but didn't know him very well at that point. So I reached out to Len and I said, hey, you know, Anthony told me to get in touch with you. You've, you know, been helping answer questions for him with 3D printing. This is what I'm looking to do. And initially, I just wanted one head. Like I just wanted and we had done two versions. We did one that was like the full fox head, and we did one that was like an insert that was meant to go inside of the Legion's hoods, like the Elf Ranger. Len printed it for me. That really started a friendship, and it started a company because after Len did the ones for me, he reached out and he said, hey, I've been thinking of starting to do 3D printing, like starting to sell parts. Would it be cool if we printed some of these and made them available for sale? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Let's, you can totally do that. And this is before Wolf King Customs was a thing. Like this was literally the start of Wolf King Customs. I like to jokingly say that, I mean, it is the house that the Kitsune built in some ways. That was the first sale we did. And dude, it was insane. Like that first sale, we sold, I think, only painted versions up front. And I was going to paint all of them. This is when I had time to do stuff like this. And we sold out of all of the painted versions. We offered it in the traditional orange. We offered a black one, and we offered a white one. We sold out of the entire sizable run in like minutes. They were gone.
Wow.
And then we ended up coming back a few weeks later and selling some unpainted ones. And I mean, those early days, that was the first product. And it was insane how many people were buying those fox parts, those two fox heads, and we did a fox tail. That's really how it started. And then, of course, if you know the Wolf King custom story, then Emil came on board, and then Steven came on board, and you came on board, and Jesse, and all the people that Len works with today. But yeah, I mean, that project, it not only connected me with Walter DeMarco, who I've worked with many other times since, but that started one of my dearest friendships that I have today. You know, yes, there's a working relationship there as well, but you know, the friendship trumps all of that. That friendship with Len and Wolf King Customs absolutely started because of the Kitsune.
That's awesome. So we're going to look at, you know, quite a few of the customs that you've done with them and a lot of the different parts that are still available through Wolf King. So if anybody sees anything here, you know, all these heads should be available through Wolf King. But I did want to point out, like, you know, there's a lot of folks out there that are 3D printing now. There's a lot of folks that are dipping their toes into ZBrush and things like that. So if there's somebody out there watching this and you've got a thing in your head that you've just never seen made and you want made, either try your hand at sculpting yourself or reach out to somebody and see if you can bring it to life, because
Absolutely.
who knows, you may start a company.
That's how
So
it started, man.
all right. So here we go. So I picked out this one first because I just think it's super cool. I love the eye patch. I love the fact that you did this on a Bardrick build. But yeah, tell us a little bit about this one.
So this is one of the kind of like second round of Kitsune heads that we did. When we first started, it was just the basic Kitsune.
Mhm.
And again, I did a handful of customs with that first basic head. I did one that was like a ranger that was very much kind of like almost like a Robin Hood from the Disney movie, because it was a fox archer and stuff. But one of the ones I did was a samurai, and it used a mashed up 2.0 body with some armor, some samurai armor from an articulated icons figure. I did a lot of figures with those armor parts back then. And that became kind of my main Kitsune character, that Kitsune samurai. It's a character whose name is Kickapoo, which is, I got that from Travis Bowles, because Travis was talking about it and he forgot the word Kitsune and he called it a Kickapoo. So I said, well, that's really funny. I'm going to name the character Kickapoo. And that's where it came from. But what ended up happening with my Kitsune, as Wolf King Customs started growing, we started offering more products. I wanted to create like series. I didn't just want to do parts and say, boom, parts. In those early days, a lot of the stuff I did were very story and series based. Like all the Turtles were the War of the Akapara. And we wrote character stories. We wrote bios for these characters. So similar to Mythic Legions, where it's like, hey, here's a character in a bio. You can follow that, or you can just use it for your own headcanon to do what you want. We really approached the parts the same way. So I took inspiration for the Kitsune from a classic manga called Lone Wolf and Cub. Absolutely love Lone Wolf and Cub. And it's basically a story of a samurai who is wrongly accused of a crime. His family is killed except for his young son. And him and his young son basically travel the countryside seeking revenge. It's classic samurai. Again, it's a classic manga. There's also, like a whole live action series that you can watch, classic samurai stuff. But I kind of took a lot of that inspiration from my Kitsune story. I called it Lone Wolf and Pup. Lone Fox and Pup is what I called it. And this was meant to be the villain character. So if you look at Lone Wolf and Cub, the villain character in that story is a very grizzled old man that wears an eye patch. And the actual eye patch, what it is it's kind of the hand guard on a sword that he has strapped over his eye. So that's what that was meant to be. So this was very much me taking that Lone Wolf and Cub villain and sketching an old grizzled fox. And this is one that I literally drew and handed to Walter and said, hey, this is what I'm looking for. I showed him the concept art and, I showed him like the inspiration art from Lone Wolf and Cub. Then I showed him my sketch and it became this particular character.
That's awesome. I love this. And like I said, the fact that you use the Bardrick for it, it looks amazing. But here's some of the ones that you were talking about, kind of the earlier. You've got the one that will go into the hood. And for folks that may not know, so your characters that have the hood on them, whether it's like Valak or the Elf Ranger or things like that, like those heads are glued in there, so they're not like a swappable pop and swap piece like you would think of like arms and legs, but they can come out with the right amount of work, a lot of heat, a lot of time, and then when you do, there's like a little kind of like a notch in it, and the sculpts that we have here that will slide into that and kind of hold it in place, right?
Yeah, they're not meant to come out, but they do, and I think that's important, because I've seen some people when I talk about like certain customizing, like just the other day, I posted a Stavros that I drilled a couple holes in the back of his pauldron armor to plug in some wings. And, someone was like, oh, I'd be really worried about drilling into my figure. If you're going to be a customizer, you got to get over that fear.
Right.
Like, that's part of what this is like. And there's nothing, if that's not for you, if you just want to pop and swap existing parts, that's totally cool as well. But part of customizing is modifying. It's removing things that aren't technically meant to be removed or modifying them in a way to suit your needs. So that's what, I did with that hood piece, because there's a lot of Mythic Legions parts that aren't meant to come apart, but they're made as separate pieces at the factory to make them easier to paint and easier to pull out of the steel molds. So because they're genuinely like molded as separate pieces, they're injected as separate pieces and then glued together, anything that you put together, you can find a way to get it apart, like you said, with heat and patience. So that was the idea there, was to be able to just slap that fox head inside that hood and get that hooded look for the character.
And I know throughout you've also used the fox on different body styles. We just saw it on a 1.0 with the Bardric. You've got it on a regular 2.0 here on the right, and then more of kind of the goblin build on the left. So that no like set body type that it has to be. I love the fact that you can kind of have some size variance within the Kitsune. So
yeah, I actually again, these are literally two of the first ones I did. So, right out of the gate, I knew I wanted to do the Kitsune Ranger. And then that smaller build, that was when I did the Lone Fox and Pup. That was the pup. So in the actual Lone Wolf and Cub, it's a real little kid. I didn't have a real little piece, so that's why I used this one. At least it was shorter in stature, but I loved the fact that head worked really well on either of those pieces there. The one you just showed on the 1.0, that head, just because of the way it's sculpted, it's a little larger. So it actually works really well on the 1.0. But that was the thought process, was to be able to create parts that could work across a range of different body styles here. So people could mix and match and do what they wanted to.
Yeah, I just like the idea that, if you want to have a Kitsune, it doesn't mean that you have to have a certain size, right? Like you can kind of change it up. And then the armor here. So this is early days. So obviously you're getting stuff from a lot of different lines. Tell us a little bit about the armor on this one on the left.
So that was, as I said, from an Articulated Icons samurai figure. They had a series that was also a Kickstarter. I mean, goodness, it's probably over 10 years ago now, if I think about it. But they had a series. It was the Frush that did it. It was called Articulated Icons, the Feudal series. And it was basically ninjas and samurai. They're not to scale with Mythic Legions because they're like true 6-inch scales. They would go better with like a G.I. Joe Classified than they would with the Legions. But the armor, which is also not technically meant to come off, but you can absolutely get it off with some heat. I used that on a lot of my early samurai figures. And even, I say early, even recently, last year at Legions Con, my whole display was Mythic Shoguns. A number of those Mythic Shoguns, new and old, used this basic recipe. And I had done a video back then that showed how to basically heat an Articulated Icons figure to get that stuff off, what parts you had to remove all of this stuff safely without cutting it, because you could just cut it down the back and pull it off, but then it's ruined. I wanted to show how you could do it without ruining anything, and that's exactly what was put on here. That's a thistlethorn underneath that body.
And what I loved about those early days too is, obviously the Four Horsemen library was a lot smaller than it is today. You've got, especially with the introduction of like Figura Obscura and Cosmic Legions, like all of a sudden you're getting all these different parts from different places. But back then, you would have a lot of fodder from other lines. And, as a new person getting into it, I would go to your website and you would have these things. And not only would you show the pictures of them, but then you would have like the recipe for it. Like, here's where I got all these parts, which made me make eBay purchases on stuff that a lot of them I used, a lot of them I never even got around to using, but I was just like searching for the weirdest toy lines that I had never heard of to try to make certain recipes.
Dude, that was a cool time back then, because and not taking anything away from where we are today. It's amazing today that we have the options available to us with 3D printing. and the ability to create almost anything we want, right?
Mhm.
Anything that we can dream up. You just mentioned if you partner with a 3D sculptor, or if you are a 3D sculptor, I mean, it's literally limitless. But back then, you had to work within that existing framework of toys that were already out there. And
Mhm.
you had to go beyond, because it got really boring just saying, okay, I'm going to use Lord of the Rings. I'm going to use Masters Classics. Trying to experiment with some of those wacky toy lines like Shadowrun and stuff, like things that a lot of people were like, what is this all about? I'm going to tell you, I feel like that process really has benefited me. Even in my time working with Four Horsemen today, I get to put together, a lot of different designs for these characters, and being able, even though I'm obviously thinking for those characters only within our library, just being able to look at parts and break them down to their components and have creative ways to be able to use them, that has benefited me incredible. Even something as stupid as last year's Legions Con figure, doing the nunchucks for the Gaspar figure, like that was genuinely just knowing the parts and saying, how can I use these differently than they've already been presented? All of those skills were honed in these early days of the customizing.
Yeah, I love that use of imagination. I was actually just talking with another gentleman yesterday. I was doing an interview with him, and we were talking about Muppet Babies when watching that when we were kids, and I was like, I just loved that cartoon because there was nothing super elaborate about it or whatever, but like it's these kids stuck in a room with like the most mundane things, but all of a sudden a cardboard box can become a spaceship.
Yep.
Or a house or a castle or whatever, and it's like using that imagination and I love that of what you're talking about. I remember you would even talk about things like stuff that was like for 1/6 scale figures, but you're like, yeah, this is for 1/6 scale, but it works really well with an ogre, like especially if you're looking for an oversized shield or weapon or whatever.
Yep. I literally just posted one of those the other day using 1/6 scale parts. Yeah, absolutely. Thinking beyond what is right in front of you and most obvious, that's going to open up such exciting doors.
Yeah. And then here, kind of the exact same heads that we had on the last one, but now you're using them on a female body. Yeah. And I love that. I love the color scheme on this. I love the fact that you chose this body to use it on. Yeah. Thalen, the colors for Thalen is probably my favorite color scheme of Mythic Legions. It's just awesome.
And this was a time when Thalen was readily available.
Yeah.
This was an easy custom to do because after you bought one of these heads from Wolf King Customs, you could easily go out and find a Thalen for $37, $50 max. How times have changed. So right out of the gate, we decided we were going to do, I said, the 3 colors. So we did the traditional orange that you saw in the first photos. We did this kind of snowy version, this white version. We did a black version. And, one of the things I loved about these heads, and I still love today, is I've seen some people paint them so incredibly detailed. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to go to that extreme. These are actually some very, very easy heads to paint. This particular one here, and I had done tutorials on this way back in the day. If you really dig back into my Mythic Customs channel, you can find them. I just hit this with some spray paint. So I literally, the white on this, I just hit it with a nice misty spray paint. Len had printed these in like a grayish color. So it worked really well as a base. I hit it with that spray paint to get the white that I wanted. And then all I did here was a little bit of paint on the eyes, little bit of paint on the nose. And I might have even, I don't even think I did anything inside of the ears. I just allowed the natural shadows that you get from the spraying to create that look of depth in there. One thing I've said to people for years is when you first get started, pick a character that has just one color eyes. Mm-hmm. trying to paint pupils and try to paint actual like realistic human looking eyes is incredibly difficult. Doing those little just dots of color, it's so much easier to accomplish. And I've seen people do the Kitsune with both kinds of eyes. I think they both look great. But I loved the fact that this first project of mine, this first project of Wolf King, was one that was very much a stepping stone for a lot of people. Because for a lot of people, this was their first 3D printed Legions part that they customized.
Yeah, I mean, from early on, before I had a relationship with Wolf King Customs, I really flocked to their parts because there's a lot of them that you can take a very easy approach to. You can just, throw down a color, do some dry brushing, and boom, you're done. But those same sculpts, you could then, when you start getting more advanced skills, you can do them a different way and make them very, unique looking. Like I think about like Emil's like the Angel Knight that he does, right? It's like you could do just a black on there, do a silver dry brush, call it a day. Or you can start painting in all the details and make it a different color and put some trim colors on there. And, so same thing with these, like you said, that you can throw down a simple color and paint the eyes and call it a day. Or if you want to paint pupils and you want to do some, let's say some color variation in the fur or whatever, you have that option as well.
The trick for that, and I can tell you, this has been the secret to Wolf King Custom success since day one, is we make stuff that we want for ourselves and we use them ourselves. These are not just things that we're pumping out just to put on the store and sell. Like every one of us are making things that we want to use. I mean, you just mentioned Emil. Look at the amount of Emil's parts that he uses in his own customs in a variety of different ways to create all of his crazy tributes and stuff. Every single part that I worked with Walter and Len on, I worked on it because I wanted it for my own collection. When you are not just a sculptor, when you're not just a creator, but you're also a customizer as well, I think you understand how to present that stuff, how to architect that stuff in such a way that it's going to be very, very friendly to both a beginning painter and someone that wants to ratchet it up a few levels and do something, even bigger and better.
Well, yeah, and I mean that really comes from the top down, right? Because it's the same thing from buying from the Horsemen. Like there are people that make toys that also like toys, right? Yeah. They're not making toys because that's their business model and they need to do it. They actually want to make stuff that they enjoy and they want to see.
Absolutely. I said this just the other day during some of the Bayether interviews. One thing I said on one of the interviews was, you may not agree with all the decisions we make. You may not like everything that we put out, but I hope you can at least respect the purity of vision. The fact that we are putting out the things that we genuinely want to see, and again, like it, don't like it, buy it, don't buy it, at least respecting the fact that, hey, these are artists, these are creators that are doing exactly what they want, whether it fits my collection or not. That's pretty damn cool.
Absolutely. So here's a couple other ones with those early sculpts and using a variety of different parts here. So I was hoping you'd kind of break down some of these because I was kind of at a loss.
So the one on the right here, the samurai, that's Kickapoo. So that is my main character, and I have it right here on the side of me. So this is actually what Kickapoo looks like today. So he's going through.
Nice.
Yeah, so he's gone through a few different variations over the years. This is actually a secondary head that we did after the closed mouth head. We did do an open mouth one. It's just like what, you just showed in that photo, but it's got a couple extra pieces that we've added to it. The red scarf around his neck, that's actually a symbol of like luck and prosperity in Japan and stuff. And interestingly, I also have this. This is the head that you see on the custom in that photo. This is the very first Kitsune head that was ever painted. So I have this.
Super cool.
This is the first head that Len sent me, the first one I've painted. It's fallen off its display a few times, and it is now broken. The front of his face is broken. His ear is chipped. So it's no longer on display on the character, but it's part of my Kitsune display just as a sentimental item there, because that is genuinely the very, very first Kitsune. The one on the left, that's when I started really getting excited about these, and I just went Kitsune crazy. And I was trying to put the Kitsune in a lot of different environments. So that was very much my like steampunk, like hot air balloon explorer. So he's got goggles on his head, which the goggles came. So if we look at this, right? Goggles came from a G.I. Joe Sigma 6 figure.
Okay.
The sword on his back came from a Lord of the Rings figure. It's a thump body that he's wearing there. That skirt is from a Lord of the Rings figure as well. And that wacky cane that he's holding there is from a McFarlane Toys Twisted Land of Oz wizard figure. So 3 very different lines represented along with Mythic Legions in that one custom there.
Yeah, and the other thing with the Mythic Legions, you've got this like weaved pattern with the belts, which was one of your early videos that I absolutely loved. Was like, you know, you get some of these extra things that you've just got a ton of. It's like, what do I do with all these? And you had one video that was like, okay, here's some unique ways to use the belts, and I love the way it looks here.
I know, it was such a again, and this is creation by necessity, right? Is, you know, when you put a creative person in a space and you give them very, very like strict parameters, they're going to find a way to be creative within those parameters. So in those early days, yeah, we didn't have everything we did, but you ended up with all these extra belts. Like as soon as you started collecting, back then it was funny because when you first got into Mythic Legions, you wanted more belts because every figure came with one, and you were like, well, what if I want to do 2 shoulder belts? I'm going to take a belt from one figure to put it on another. So you were like dying to get belts. But the minute there was like a fulcrum point, there was a point that you got so many that you now started having extra belts, and you went from I need more belts to what do I do with this bag of belts? I have so many extra belts and wing adapters.
Yeah.
What do I do with them? And figuring out ways to crisscross the pattern, something as simple as that, totally transformed the look, almost made it look like a weaved leather armor on the front as opposed to belts. Again, really simple little thing we did early on that had a nice impact.
Yeah, I've actually, I'm working on, you know, me and a couple of the folks are doing the testing for the Mythic Legions D&D game. And my character that I'm making for that, which is one of my favorite parts of the Mythic D&D game, is like wanting to bring your character to life. But my character for that is using a very similar like weaved belt pattern as this on there, just because I love that look of it.
So cool. It does.
So here's a couple other ones here.
Yeah. Again, so the one on the left was me just experimenting with a lot of different ways that I could present these characters, and also starting to get inspired by tribute customs. A couple years ago at Legions Con, I did a whole display about tribute customs, because while I'm not as well known for tribute customs as, say, like Emil or Eric Miller, I've been doing it longer than both of them. So it's one of those things where it's never been my focus of doing it, but I've done a lot of it. And I love seeing the work of like Emil and Eric. It's so incredibly creative. So I wanted to be inspired by that myself and do that display. And this is one I had done years before that. That's an example of kind of what led me there. I've always liked Zartan. I thought Zartan was cool. I was looking at the hooded Kitsune, and I was just like, I'm going to turn this Kitsune into a Zartan character. And I mean, that's literally the long and short of it, just trying to paint those colors. You know, I love whenever I do a tribute, looking at whatever it is I'm trying to represent and saying, like, what are the key pieces of this character that are immediately identifiable? Because Zartan's not a fox.
Right.
You know, Zartan doesn't have a tail. So I've got to take some liberties here. But when I looked at Zartan, I'm like, hood, face paint, colors. If I can nail those items here, that's enough that immediately, if you know the character of Zartan, even tangentially, you would see that and go, oh, dude, that's a fox, like basically cosplaying as Zartan.
Yeah, I love that with tributes when it's not, you're not trying to make a better version of that character, right? Or you're not trying to make the ultimate Zartan. You're trying to make a Zartan tribute in this world, in this, with an anthropomorphic character. What would that look like? And that challenge of that it came out awesome.
And I think, I mentioned Eric and Emil. I think they are both top of the game when it comes to tribute customs, but in different ways, right? I think Eric does a really good job doing actual representations. Like I see a lot of his work and it doesn't feel like it's as stylized. Like it is just a really good, like on the nose representation of that character. Where Emil, the level of creativity that Emil exhibits with those parts and everything is just absolutely second to none. Again, both of those characters, when I did my tribute display at Legions Con 2 years ago, there was a board in front that kind of talked about it, and I called both of them out. They're of course not the only two that do tribute customs, but I called both of them out right on that board just because I think that they've elevated that kind of Legions custom and brought so much awareness to it, more so than anybody else.
Well, and I know Emil specifically does a lot where he challenges himself to use only mythic parts if he can, or at least as many as possible. And so you get, just like you said, when you put kind of like the, parameters around folks, they're going to try to figure out a way to work within those parameters and still be creative. Like when he did the Ahsoka one, and he took a demon head and flipped it upside down and backwards to use as like the tendrils and stuff. Like, I don't even know who would think of that. And then you were talking about like, like drilling into a figure and like, having a, like he cut that head, like he's slicing into a head, destroying a head in order to make this. And if it doesn't work, like you're just out that head, and just the bravery and the insight to see something like that. So
absolutely fearless. So the Kitsune on the right here, that's actually my most recent Kitsune creation. And that was part of this year's Legions Con, my Mythic Shoguns display. It's not only my most recent Kitsune, I think it was the last custom I actually did for that display this year. And in fitting fashion, that's actually Sir Gerard. So my Kitsune, my Shogun display this year, it was me not just creating like samurai Legions characters. I wanted to reimagine the realm of mythos as if it was set in a fantasy feudal Japan. So all the characters on display were actual Legions characters: Atlas, Scapular, Artemis, Arethyr, the whole Dark Four were there. All of the faction leaders from the Legions of Light were there. That's my focus. And one of the last ones, actually the last one I did, was Sir Gerard. And, it started with that, that torso that originally came with Krotos, was also on the Lord Bashadi figure. That's always had kind of a samurai-like look to me. And the fact that I could paint some of the plates to make a cross pattern like Sir Gerard, I thought was pretty cool. Sir Gerard is a changeling. He's a character that can change his appearance, which I did that specifically so people could put any head on Sir Gerard and say, hey, it's canon. It's a simple LBC pop and swap, but it's canon. Right. I thought that was a fun little joke. But interestingly, in Japanese folklore, Kitsune are also shape changers. So it just kind of came full circle. And it's one of those magic moments that you got to be open to that kind of serendipity. You got to be open to those unexpected little moments of magic. And it was one of these moments where I was working on Sir Gerard and I was like, wait a minute, I'm most well known for my Kitsune customs. Kitsunes are shape changers. Sir Gerard's a shape changer. It was like everything kind of converged for me to make this Sir Gerard character one of my Kitsune customs.
That's awesome. I love how that merged together like that. So you had brought it up. You brought up the term LBC, and you know, for those of us that have been around for a while, we know that that's Lazy Boy Customs.
Yep.
But explain to us kind of what that means. How did that come about, and what is an LBC?
So that, again, we owe that to Travis Bowles as well. Early on, Travis started calling me LBC, Lazy Boy Custom. And it was a joke because a Lazy Boy Custom was supposed to be, in some ways, what we would probably call a pop and swap these days, or the most basic of customs. But someone going out there and saying like, oh, this is my custom figure, and it's really just like swapping heads on something. I've always been one. If I see someone do a super simple pop and swap and call it a custom, I applaud. I'm never going to, ridicule them. The fact that they're being creative and they're putting themselves out there, I think is amazing. And they deserve nothing but praise. I don't care how complicated or simple it is. But Travis started calling me LBC because I wasn't doing that, because I was doing such complex stuff. He thought it was funny. The irony of the nickname was what made it funny. But rather than kind of push back and be like, hey, these are actually complex, I completely embraced it. I loved the name. I actually have a Cosmic Legions diorama that Crashbox Customs did for me. And in the corner, there were 3 letters that you could pick whatever 3 letters you wanted. And I had it say LBC in my Crashbox Custom. So a lot of times, if you look at my Cosmic Legions photos that are in a diorama, you'll see LBC up in the corner. And that's kind of a fun little nod to this. So that's what
we may see that here in just a few minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, but I do like that, because I think this line is really based on the modularity of it, right? Like the whole thing is getting people to play with their toys and mess around. And I mean, you got some great, obviously we know Dorklayer, right? He does the reviews, and then he does the pop and swaps at the end and does some amazing ones. Joe Suter's another one. There's several folks in the community do pop and swaps. And it shows that even without painting, just by mixing parts up, you can create these really awesome things. And I've seen a lot of folks that like see one of those and they're like, okay, I'm definitely copying that. And that's great. Like, I think that's awesome.
And to me, it's always been about, what you're doing with your channel and trying to inspire people to get started. I've said this before, that you very much have picked up kind of that baton from myself. A lot of what I was doing in the early days of Legions customizing. And I don't know about you, but I always found it so refreshing to talk to those people that were afraid to get started, that were just getting started, that needed that push. Yes, I can do incredibly complex paint jobs and incredibly complex customs, but I always found it so rewarding to hear, and I still hear it today when I hear people at shows come up and they say, hey, you inspired me to start doing this. It's become such an important part of my life, such a creative outlet. Starting with popping and swapping, the approach I always had was just get them going, just get them started. Don't show them the most complex figure, a dwarf head or a barbarian head that they've got to paint. Don't show them that. Just get them popping and swapping. I remember a couple of years ago at Legions Con when we were at the La Quinta and we did that pop and swap Wolf King thing. And I stood up on a chair and snapped a figure in half. And the room went, dude, that was such a cool, I love this sport. I snapped it in half, pulled the skirt off, took a Legions figure, and I just did a quick pop and swap with a other figure part. And the room was just like you could see the possibilities open up, giving someone a figure, popping an arm off and saying, now you do the other one, and them popping it, you see their eyes light up. But then if you take them a step further, okay, now you're comfortable with pop and swaps, do some dry brushing.
Yep.
Start with the dots, paint the dots, do some dry brushing. Every one of these little steps, it's amazing how many doors it opens. The minute you start popping and swapping, your collection is going to take on a whole new life. There's going to be so many possibilities. And then when you start some basic paints, more possibilities. And you just build up those skill sets until, before you know it, you're creating these absolutely amazing custom pieces.
Well, and I think it's cool because I think that is the start of it for most people is first just switching the parts, switching a head, switching an arm, switching this and that. And I think the best way to get somebody into that is to give them one of the Legions Con exclusives. You do such a great job of putting together these sets, right, that have all of these extra options. It's not just, here's a figure and that's what it is and put it on display and that's what you got. Like it's a box full of all of this stuff that it's like, you could show it this way. You could show it that way. You can mix it with the other figure. And to me, it used to be OG Barbarian. Everybody talked about, like, if you're going to get somebody started, give them an OG Barbarian, let them play around with the options. Now I think it's absolutely any of the Legion Con two-pack sets. You just hand that to somebody and just watch them play. And that's it.
Oh yeah. I will say that I agree with you. That's intentional. Like, I am trying to add absolute play value, absolute pop and swap, value and options to those sets for sure. The Furious Force set is, in my opinion, I really loved last year's Cosmic set. The Cosmic Amazing Alien set is really great
good
for that.
Yeah.
But the Furious Force set, because of the way it was architected and the fact that it also works with some other figures, there's so many possibilities here. I will tell you that I had that very much in mind for this year's releases as well. I think the Furious Force set is like the high watermark of options and playability within a set. I think this year might exceed it.
Wow. That's impressive. Yeah, I gotta admit, like last year, I loved the Cosmic set. The Mythic set, I was like, I wasn't sold on, especially the Gaspar one. I was like, I wasn't sold on it at first, which is silly now because I'm using that body to make, like, monks and priests and stuff now that the Maxilius robes are out. But the thing that sold me on that set, on buying multiples, was when I saw Trevor's picture of the bare knuckle dwarf fighter. And I was like, oh my God, that is so great. Like, I just love that. And that's just one of the many options that you can make with that. So,
dude, even something like the skirt that comes with Gorich, flipping that up and putting it on as like a cape, like even something as simple as that. I remember the first time that I saw Trevor do that, he shot the Jagualian head with that on as a cape instead of a skirt. And you're like, well, that totally changes the character profile. It changes the silhouette of the character, the way that character would just feel like it would hold himself. Again, that's what this line is all about. And we genuinely do try to throw like 4 or 5 ideas worth, or like figures worth of ideas in one of those 2-pack boxes.
Well, and that's customizing, right? Like, people will ask, like, what is a custom? And I think it's anything that is creating a new look, a new profile, a new character, whatever that means. So whether it's mixing other lines, whether it's popping and swapping or painting. So,
and that's why, as I said, I would never say that like a pop and swap is not a custom, because I've heard people say like, well, is it a pop and swap? Or it used to be Kit Bash. Kit Bash was, because we kind of made pop and swap. That's kind of a Legions phrase that I think we really popularized. But in the early days, Kit Bash was the word that you heard. So a Kit Bash was like a combination of parts, but you didn't paint them or modify them in any like, real big way. And right from the beginning, I was always like, why, man? Why are we going to put labels on this? I don't care. Call whatever the hell you want. Call it a custom. You're making something new, and that act of creation should be celebrated. And that's what I want to do.
For sure. Well, we've got a few more slides to get through. I'm running a little long, but I just like talking to you. So, but yeah, so here's a couple. Now, obviously the one on the left is definitely another tribute. So yeah, tell us what we got here.
That's Foxpool. That's a Sunday afternoon. That's me sitting in my workbench area just on a Sunday afternoon with a bunch of parts saying like, hey, I wonder what I could make out of this, and just getting inspired to see if I could paint the character up to look like Deadpool. Once again, similar to what I said on Zartan, hitting those specific notes so you know exactly what it is. That's one that's not in my collection. I've since sold that one. I think every other one you've shown is actually still in my collection. Foxpool was actually sold probably at a Legions Con a couple years ago. And then the one that is on the right, that's just an example of one of those early paint jobs that I did. I mentioned we did orange, white, and black.
Right.
That's the black version. Once again, using a Goblin Legion builder. I've probably customized more Goblin Legion builders than any other figure in the line. Using that combined with, once again, that articulated Icon Samurai armor.
That original Goblin Legion builder is so good. And then this is another head that's out there that was this last year or the year before?
Probably a couple years ago now.
Okay. Yeah, but I love the look of this.
And again, this, when I was talking earlier about expanding the story to be inspired by Lone Wolf and Cub, this was part of that as well. Because in Lone Wolf and Cub, you know, the main antagonist sends out a bunch of ninjas at one point to go and attack. So I was like, ooh, a fox ninja, that would be really, really cool. We did the two different versions. We did one that just had, you know, the ninja mask, and then one that had kind of the faceplate. At the time, one of them was exclusive to Legion Shop, and one of them was exclusive to Wolf King Customs. But since Legion Shop has closed the doors, Wolf King Customs has, you know, taken all of the stuff that was originally at Legion Shop in and offered themselves. So they now offer both of these. But again, this is a Goblin Legion builder figure. And one of the things that I did here is the Goblin Legion builder, it's got like...
I was hoping you were going to talk about this. This is my favorite part.
Yes, dude, super simple little change, right? So yeah, it's got this elbow armor. And I wanted the arms to look a little more sleek, right? Because it's meant to be like a ninja. And then I also like the idea, if you look at like some ninja outfits, like, you know, the characters from Mortal Kombat, the way that they're like tunics, they almost kind of have like very defined shoulders. So what I did was I just pulled off that armor because it just pegs right in on the elbow, and I just glued them onto the pieces right here onto the shoulders. You still have full range of motion in the arms, but it changes, again, it changes the look of the figure, the silhouette, and it gives them, instead of using the pauldrons, it's not as big as the pauldrons, it just gives them kind of almost that V shape that I was going for.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about using the OG Goblin so much, and I know I have as well. And just a simple change like that, it does change that overall look. Yeah. And it's so easy, but it looks so great. Like, these look awesome as pauldrons here.
Yeah, love it.
I love it. And I've got a whole baggie full of these elbow pads. So I will definitely be using this. And then another sculpt that you've got, this might be my favorite one, is the space one. So yeah, Space Kitsune.
And there's the LBC. You can see in the corner the LBC.
So this was just, you know, Cosmic is out and you're like, hey, let's bring them to space.
So, I mean, obviously you could use the other Kitsune heads on a Cosmic body.
Yep.
And I was thinking about it, and this, you know, the Cosmic stuff hit quite a while after the fact that we the time that we introduced the Kitsune. And Len and I were talking about, like, okay, well, which heads do we have that will work on Cosmic? And really any of the animal heads work, right?
Right.
Because we're like, well, they're all weird anthropomorphic characters anyway. Any of them can be space turtles or whatever. But I wanted to do something more with the Kitsune. I didn't just want to upsize the existing Kitsune heads and pop it on a body. I wanted to really do a Cosmic Kitsune character. So once again, went back to Walter. And this is not a brand new sculpt. This is built on the original Kitsune. So he took the original Kitsune STL files and built the helmet on top of it. And I love the fact that, you know, instead of the fox's ears, we kind of turned, we still wanted to have that fox head shape. So we turned the ears into almost like, vents, like kind of like exhaust port type looking things. And then once again, in the spirit of, I love synergy, right? I love patterns and everything. I love revisiting old ideas and making them new. So when Len and I first launched this, we did an orange, a black, and a white. So when we launched the Cosmic Kitsune, I did the same thing. So I painted the orange one to match the Walter the Mad Body. I painted the white one to match the Tusk Science Officer. And I painted the black one to work with the Thygar, the deluxe Thygar. That's Thygar Valkatar. So that's what you're seeing right here. All three of those different heads.
I love that. I'm actually working on one of these. It's one of the numerous projects on my desk, but it is one that I'm working on that I'm excited for. Yeah. So, and then I only got two more things. One is kind of a, you revealed this not too long ago, and it's pretty exciting stuff that the Kitsune are now part of the Mythic Legions game that's going to be coming out, which means they are canon.
They are canon. They are. Yeah. So this was a surprise. The Mythic Legions Tactics or the Aether Blade game, that was, that's created by another company. Obviously, it's our license, so we work with them very closely. But the game was developed by Great Hall Game Studio. And I did a lot to help them in those early days of their campaign, both the private crowdfund and the Kickstarter. So kind of as a thank you and recognition of the work I did for them, they surprised me by saying, hey, we want to put the Kitsune in as an NPC in the game. That was actually one of the reward levels. You could actually have a character you created be an NPC, but they did it for me as a thank you for what I've done. I've since been told that Kickapoo is actually one of the bosses in the game.
Wow. Okay.
So Kickapoo is actually one of the bosses. I won't tell you what level he is at, but so yeah.
I love the likeness that they've gotten with. I mean, it looks very similar to that initial sculpt.
Well, that's what we gave them. We gave them the actual files. I mean, Len might have even given them the STL, to be honest with you. But we certainly gave them photos of the sculpture and photos of, my custom and everything for them to model the character after. So, yeah, I mean, it was definitely a surprise. It's very, very cool. But you are right. It does kind of make, I mean, I don't know that we'll call them samurai, but it does make that kind of swordsman character. And it does make Kitsune canon for the Mythic Legions line. And it's kind of funny because a story that I was just today working on some edits for the Mythic Legions first 10 years book. Mm-hmm. And one of the pages I was editing was Krotos, the character, the satyr character from the Alithia wave. Mm-hmm. And you may not know this story, but Krotos was originally supposed to be a fox.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. So when I discovered this on a live stream. Eric literally told me this on a live stream. It might have been the Alithia live stream. I didn't know this prior to being in front of the whole world. But yeah, Eric told me that when he was originally conceiving the Krotos character, it was meant to be a fox. But in the time between him coming up with that idea and actually starting the work, our Kitsune heads came out. Now, I had no idea about this. Again, was revealed to me live on the air. Eric actually rolled back the idea and didn't do a fox because he didn't want to step on anybody's toes, which is pure insanity, by the way.
Right.
The fact that the company who is leading the charge here knows about the 3D market and cares about the 3D market and embraces these artists. And of course, there's times where there's going to be things that we do. We've had things that are already in development that we haven't shown yet, that then somebody puts out a similar 3D part. And it's like, okay, you never want to be seen as like you're copying anybody, but a 3D part can be conceived, sculpted, printed, released in a day. We don't have the ability to work that quickly. So, but in this particular case, Eric had the time to roll it back and he didn't actually do it. He has since said that it was the best decision because it forced him to rethink the character, and a lot of what he did for Krotos with the way he designed it really contributed to the rest of the design of the Harvest Court and the characters in the Alithia wave from Xylona's flock. But yeah, that's an interesting little tidbit that there almost actually was a fox character in Mythic Legions. Not to say that there won't ever be, but there almost was already.
Oh, I'm sure there will be at some point. we'll get there. And probably as much of an honor as this was, I got something, today from our good friends at Purple Gang Gang. They knew that I was going to sit down and talk with you. So they sent something, and this is Jeremy Girard as a Kitsune. So, so there you go. They wanted, they wanted me to share that with you. Now you're not going to be able to see because we're down at the bottom, but he also he's got yeah. Little Crocs on, little purple Crocs. So
well, I have black Crocs on right now. So.
Yeah. So there you go. Yeah, there's you as a Kitsune.
Thanks, guys.
So well, Jeremy, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. You have definitely been an inspiration to myself as well as many others. Love what you did, and have done as a customizer, and what you're doing with the studio now is just taking it to the next notch. The creativity, just the imagination, and like I said, just inspiring others to continue creating. I love it. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
So yeah, thanks a lot for sitting down and talking with me today.
My pleasure, man. Happy to do it. It was a lot of fun.
Totally. So I'm going to put you backstage. If you've got to run, I understand you're a busy guy. If not, hang out and I'll be with you in just a second.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Well, folks, that was another episode of How'd They Do That. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I don't know if it's possible, though, because I really enjoyed that. But keep that stuff in mind. I mean, as we've gone through there, you saw some that Jeremy did that were tributes, some that used parts from other lines. You saw that, he had an idea that wasn't out there, that didn't exist, that he worked with a sculptor to bring to life. He worked with a 3D parts company. All those options are available. You're only limited by yourself, and what you tell yourself you can or can't do. So hope that you guys found some entertainment and enjoyment out of this. Hope that it inspired you. If it did, and if you go out there and create something based on something you saw here, maybe even go out and buy some of these Kitsune parts from Wolf King and put together a custom. What I'm asking you to do is tag Jeremy, tag myself, because we'd love to see what you come up with. So, until the next How'd They Do That, keep creating, folks.